It was just another crowded Friday afternoon at the local cafe when Mark, a single dad juggling work emails and a toddler's birthday plans, noticed something odd. Across the room, his coworker, Emily, chose a small table in the corner, far from the bustling crowd, even though every other table seemed perfect for her. At first, he thought, she's overthinking again, trying too hard to avoid people. Mark wasn't wrong. Emily had a quiet aura about her, always polite but reserved. Yet today, something made him pause. She wasn't scrolling through her phone or opening a laptop. She was quietly arranging napkins and a few small cups. Curious, he finally walked over, ready to say something casual, maybe even tease her for being dramatic about seating. But then he noticed the tiny details, the extra cup on her table, the small packet of cookies, a neatly folded note. His heart skipped a beat. She wasn't alone at that table. Emily was preparing a surprise for someone who couldn't ask for it, an elderly man who came here every week but always sat quietly by himself, unnoticed. She had chosen that table on purpose, just to make his day a little warmer. Mark felt a pang of admiration mixed with guilt. He had assumed the worst, judged too quickly, and yet here was Emily, showing a depth of kindness that wasn't loud or performative. It was human, it was real. As he watched, a smile spread across her face when the old man arrived. At that moment, Mark realized sometimes the smallest acts speak the loudest. Mark couldn't tear his eyes away. The elderly man shuffled in slowly, his shoulders stooped, his eyes tired but curious. Emily greeted him warmly, gesturing to the small setup she had made. The man's eyes widened in surprise, then softened into a smile that reached the corners of his eyes, the kind of smile that had been missing for a long time. Mark sat down at a nearby table, pretending to be busy with his laptop, but his curiosity overpowered him. He noticed the note on the table. It wasn't just a casual greeting. It was thoughtful, personal, and filled with encouragement. "Hope this makes your day a little brighter," it read. And just like that, a small act of attention transformed the man's entire demeanor. Mark's mind raced. He had seen countless acts of kindness online, in movies and in stories, but seeing it unfold in front of him, so quietly and sincerely, hit differently. This wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about humanity. Emily had seen someone in need and acted, without anyone else noticing. As the man thanked her, his voice trembling slightly, Mark realized that he had misjudged Emily. He had assumed her choice of table was trivial or self-conscious. But she had chosen intentionally, putting someone else's happiness before her own comfort. In that moment, Mark felt a shift inside him, a gentle nudge reminding him that true kindness often goes unseen, but its impact can be life-changing. He looked at Emily again, seeing her not just as a coworker but as a quietly courageous person, someone whose empathy and thoughtfulness left a mark that no one could ignore once noticed. And just like that, Mark made a silent promise to himself, to slow down, to notice, and maybe, to follow her example. The following Monday, Mark couldn't stop thinking about that quiet act of kindness. He replayed it in his mind like a scene from a movie, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. At the office, Emily seemed the same, calm, collected, polite, but he knew now that she carried a depth few noticed. Later that week, Mark decided to grab lunch at the same cafe. He wanted to see if he could somehow thank her, but when he arrived, the usual corner table was empty. Curious, he asked the barista about Emily, only to hear something that made his chest tighten. "She's been visiting the hospital most days this week," the barista said softly. "She's helping a little boy with leukemia. His parents said she's like an angel, always bringing little surprises and cheering him up." Mark felt a lump in his throat. That same gentle, thoughtful woman who had brightened an elderly man's day was quietly making a bigger difference in a child's life, someone facing unimaginable pain. The world had no idea what she was doing, and yet she never sought attention. At that moment, Mark realized that kindness isn't about being seen, it's about the ripple effect. One small action could transform someone's day, and sometimes, unknowingly, their entire life. Emily's choice of table had been more than just a thoughtful gesture. It was a reflection of her character, of how deeply she cared for people she barely knew. Mark left the cafe feeling inspired and humbled. He understood that his quick judgments had blinded him to humanity in its purest form. And as he walked back to the office, he promised himself he wouldn't just notice acts of kindness, he would try to live them. Because sometimes, life's most profound lessons arrive quietly, from the people we least expect, but need the most. The next Friday, Mark found himself back at the cafe, toddler in tow. He sat at a table near Emily, unsure whether to say anything. Before he could, she smiled at him warmly and waved the barista over. Mark's curiosity grew. What was she up to now? To his surprise, Emily pulled out 2 small gift bags and handed one to him, saying softly, "I noticed you were juggling a lot last week. Thought this might help." Inside was a small notebook for Mark's work notes, a coffee gift card, and a handwritten message. "Sometimes the smallest gestures make the heaviest days lighter." Mark was speechless. The irony hit him. He had misjudged her before, thinking her kindness was minor or insignificant. But here she was, extending the same thoughtfulness toward him, someone she barely knew outside work. He realized then that her generosity wasn't selective, it was her nature. As they chatted, Mark noticed the elderly man from before enter the cafe again. His eyes lit up when he saw Emily, and she waved him over. Mark watched, heart swelling, as she helped him settle in and brought him a warm drink without missing a beat. He finally understood the pattern. Emily's actions weren't isolated moments. They were part of a bigger rhythm of selflessness, a quiet mission to make life better for those around her. In that moment, Mark felt a deep sense of awe and inspiration. He thought about his own life, about how easy it had been to judge and overlook people's quiet acts. Watching Emily, he realized that humanity often speaks in whispers, in small, unnoticed gestures that leave lasting impressions. Mark left the cafe that day with a renewed heart. He promised himself he wouldn't just observe kindness anymore, he would practice it. And perhaps, one small act at a time, he could make the world a little brighter too. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Mark walked into the cafe on a quiet afternoon, but this time, he wasn't there just to observe. He had a small box in his hands and a nervous but determined look on his face. He spotted the elderly man sitting alone again, but not for long. Before Emily could even arrive, Mark walked over and greeted him warmly. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. The man smiled, surprised but welcoming. Mark placed the box on the table. Inside were fresh pastries, a warm scarf, and a handwritten note, just like Emily used to leave. The man's eyes filled with emotion as he read it. In that moment, Mark understood exactly what Emily had felt. It wasn't about the gift, it was about being seen, about reminding someone they mattered. As they talked, Emily walked in and paused, watching the scene unfold. A gentle smile spread across her face, her eyes reflecting quiet pride. Mark caught her glance and gave a small nod, as if to say, "I get it now." Later, as they all sat together, laughing over coffee and stories, Mark realized something profound. Kindness doesn't end with one person, it spreads quietly, from heart to heart, creating connections where none existed before. Emily hadn't just helped one man or one child, she had inspired a chain reaction. Walking out of the cafe that day, Mark held his daughter's hand a little tighter. He knew the world could be busy, even harsh at times, but it was also full of people like Emily, people who chose compassion without expecting anything in return. And now, he had become one of them. Because sometimes, the smallest acts don't just change someone else's life, they change yours too.